The Strategic Hotbox with Dr. Brandi Love Stankovic. Discussing leadership, business, and how to take control of your life and achieve greatness. From the streets of Las Vegas, energized, informed, and never diluted. It's time to kick some ass.
Hey, it's your girl, Dr. Brandi Stankovic. We're here on the Strategic Hotbox. Welcome back. I am so glad you're here with us today because we're going to talk about a topic that I think about many a late night when I should be sleeping, many a late night when I've had too many things to drink. And it does happen. I have my Joe Walsh shirt on today for that very purpose. Many a night listening to Joe Walsh on guitar, thinking about what's my purpose? What's your purpose? And we have a subject matter expert here with us today, Glin Bayley, that's going to join us here in a second. Let's get started. So on the Strategic Hotbox, you know, we learn, we love, and we kick some ass. So do you ever think to yourself, I want to get better? Do you ever think, I want to get better? And I've found myself doing that from time to time, going, yeah, I just want to get better. And maybe don't even have like a way to get better, or I don't even know what to do. And I actually saw a meme recently, and I may have shared this on the podcast before, but it says, I bought my girlfriend a get better card. She's not sick. I just think she could get better. I know it's terribly inappropriate, but it's also just awesome. And the thing that we should push each other to get better. I want to get better. But what does that mean? And I think sometimes we set goals, or people will set goals, and they're so elusive that it's impossible to really know how it is that we want to go forward. And I find myself wildly envious of people that seem to have their life and passion and purpose figured out. And I was talking to my kindergartner the other day. It's career. They have their career, line, and throughout the year they think about what they're going to be when they grow up. And so I was talking to him, and I asked him, and I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my kindergarten wants to be a police officer. And so I said, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm still trying to figure it out. And my little guy just kind of looks at me, and he just starts cracking up like a deep belly laugh from the back seat of the car. And I flip around. I'm like, dude, why are you laughing at me? And he just kind of looked at me, and he's just like, why on earth could you possibly, think that? And I'm like, first of all, I'm not old. I'm cool. I'm hip. How dare you, whatever. And he's like, clearly, you're already a grown up. And I was like, secondly, I'm allowed to be figuring this out forever. And will I ever even really have it figured out? I think that we all want purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, to make a difference. And sometimes purpose, finding a purpose isn't easy. And even when you do, what does that mean? I think that I have my purpose figured out. I believe that my purpose on this planet is to energize results. I know that I'm intended to help people to be the best versions of themselves. Anything that I can do to support the people around me to get out there and do what they're supposed to do. And so, okay, now what? Right. So, and I have some of that figured out, but what am I supposed to do with that? And how is it that I continue to apply that to the different jobs and careers and growth that I have? And it's not easy. And finding purpose sounds like this romantic, beautiful thing. And we've talked about it a few different times on the podcast, but I think it really is something that hits home. Now, Mark Manson, there's an author out there that has written a really awesome book, and we've talked about it here before, but The Subtle Art of Not Giving a and he gives a few questions, and he talks about how to help you define your purpose. And a couple of those questions I thought were really good to talk about today. The first is, what's your favorite flavor of shit sandwich? And he talks about basically the idea of, does it come with an olive? Because quit whining. I mean, really, everybody has a life that is not great some of the time. Pick something and do it, and realize that it's not going to be great all of the time. And everybody has to deal with things that aren't great some of the time. And I really believe that. And I think so often people think, oh, well, once I find my purpose, then forever life is going to be this beautiful dance of rainbows. And I'm just going to, just run in flower fields and chase butterflies. And that's just not true. But if you ever find that place, hook me up, hit me up on my cell. And the second question is, what is true about you today that would make your 8-year-old self cry? And when I read that question, it really hit home for me, because if you think back in the day when you were a little kid and the world seemed bright, before loss, before hardship, when you thought you were invincible, when you thought you could accomplish anything, and what would that person be excited about? But what would that person also be disappointed that you are no longer doing? What would that person be disappointed that you aren't achieving or that you aren't enjoying? And how would that person help define what your purpose should be? Another question was, what makes you forget to eat and forget to, use the restroom and forget to do all those other things? And that one I love, because there are definitely work projects and definitely parts of my day where I will literally forget to move. I will have Zach come into my office, or we'll have different, people that I work with, Eric at C Solutions and the Hotbox and everything. And they'll be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I stretch, because I have been working on this all day. And I love projects like that. That's the best part of the day, is when things happen and you just really get into something. You can just roll your sleeves up and dig right in. And the final one, that question that really hit home that I wanted to share, is, if you knew you were going to die 1 year from today, what would you do? And how would you want to be remembered? In the next year, what would you do with your life? And if you think about that over the course of the next year, what would you want to make sure you were a part of? Who would you want to make sure that was in your life and that you could connect with? And I think that's really powerful. And if you could live and focus ourselves in that purpose, I mean, that's at least being more intentional with our actions. But let's talk to a more subject matter expert in this area, and that's Glin Bayley. She's a CPA who has turned executive coach and motivational speaker, and her love for accounting was really not enough. And through some signs from the universe, which you know me and my love for signs from the universe, she was able to find her passion and purpose. So I'd like to introduce you to Glin Bayley formally. She's a conscious finance officer and C-suite advisor and performance coach. She's the creator of the Heart Framework, and she's a speaker, facilitator, CEO, and founder of Simply Glin. She's also an ambassador coach with Transition Hub and a partner at the Outperformer. And of course, she got her bachelor's in business study and financial services. She's got a really awesome accent. She was from over across the seas and went to the University of Westminster. Hello, Glin Bayley. How are you?
Hello. I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
So you're from the United Kingdom, but you're coming to us live from Australia.
I am indeed, yes.
So what time is it in Australia right now?
I'm currently in Queensland, and it's 5 a.m.
Oh my gosh, thank you. You look really fresh for it being 5 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning for you. I appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about you and your journey.
My journey has been a long one. I started in the UK with not much idea of where I wanted my career or my purpose or my passion to be. And I spent my time choosing accounting because once upon a time I was told I was good at maths. So as anyone who has no clue does, is just follow what you're told. And I started my journey with finance, and my approach to my career was very much the next chapter will reveal itself as I continue through the book. But what I wasn't really questioning at the time was whether I was reading the right book. And I learnt about that as I progressed through my finance career. I was being told by a lot of people, sales marketeers that I was dealing with, that I wasn't your typical finance person. And for so much of the time, I felt that must mean I was not very good at my job, perhaps, that they thought I wasn't a great accountant. But what I learnt when I actually sought to ask them questions around what that meant was they felt I had an understanding around people and the way I engaged with people that was much different to how my counterparts in the same profession were doing.
Sure.
And I started listening to that. And I think whilst that was nice at the time, I thought, I've got good people skills. But what does that really mean in respect of my purpose?
Sure.
And I navigated up my career focusing still on, if I get to CFO level, then I've made it. But deep down, I knew getting to CFO level was just about me, my ego, my sense of identity with proving that I can be at the top of the food chain, but not necessarily where I felt I was in my heart space. And when friends would say, "So what would you do once you got to CFO?" My answer would typically be, "Well, when I'm there, I'll quit and do something I love."
Right.
And at the time, one of them actually turned around and said, "Why would you just waste your life doing that? Why would you now do something you love?" And truthfully, I didn't have the courage because I didn't know what I loved looked like. And it took a very significant relationship ending 5 years ago for me to realize that it was time for me to open up that line of inquiry and look elsewhere for what my passion was.
I
And
love
I think in that,
Go ahead, finish your thought.
and I think in that line of inquiry, you finally allow the universe to start bringing you the signs because you create space and stillness for you to see them and for you to listen.
One of the things that I love or that I have learned in my life is that the universe is always talking to you. It's just whether or not you're listening.
That's so true. So true. And I think with the relationship ending, it forced me to look at what made me happy. And I realized my identity at that time was, whilst focused on work, I hadn't acknowledged that me being a daughter first, a wife first, was really, really important. I had me being a CFO and a senior finance executive as something that was driving the choices I made, yet that wasn't where it brought me the most joy.
Yeah.
And I think post my relationship ending, I started to inquire around, where should I go next? What do I do? And I undertook a speaking program, and mainly because I thought I would look to explore what it meant to communicate better or be a better presenter within the work environment. I was at that time somewhat bored and looking for something to enhance my skills. But what I discovered through doing that program was very much that I needed to understand what my message was. And through the course of the program, the last boot camp, if you like, was to present to a group of speakers bureaus about what my message was. And a week before, I found myself asking, I actually don't know what it is. And I sat in my bedroom and I was looking around and I thought, well, it's got to be something to do with my journey, because when people share their stories, it's often to do with their own personal story, not something that hasn't yet happened. And as I looked around my room, I thought, okay, well, what's my journey? I've had a career in finance. I've had a significant relationship and I've moved from England to Australia to start a new life. How do I make something of this? And as I looked around the room, I noticed everywhere around the room were hearts. And all throughout my life, I've loved hearts. The jewelry that I wear has hearts on them. I've got hearts in my apartment, in photo frames, in cards, lots of prints. I've always loved hearts. And I looked at that and thought, there's a sign here, but I've just not seen it. What is it? And when I relayed it back to myself to say, well, okay, if it's something to do with my heart, perhaps it's following it, perhaps it's leading with it. What does that actually mean? And I thought, if it's a message to share with people, it's got to be with how I've used my heart to take me on this journey. And when I broke that down and I looked back what it meant from my relationship ending and me moving overseas, I realized it started with 5 steps. And those 5 steps spell out the word heart. And the first step is hope. Because I realized without having hope for a better future than the one I had at that point in time, I hadn't been setting my destination for moving forward. But secondary to that, I also had to believe that hope was something I could achieve. And I think once I had both those components of hope in place, it allowed me to move to the next step. And that was energy. Understanding what fueled me versus what drained me determined whether I had enough in my tank to be able to move forwards towards that destination. the third step was action.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the scariest part, because once you've got energy in your tank and you've got your destination clear, you've actually got to turn the ignition and move forward. And especially with the move to Australia at the time, I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? But I acted. I told people that was what I wanted. I engaged with my employers at the time, and I made a decision, and I acted in favor of that decision. The fourth step was resilience. And in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the resilience, it's recognizing there's always going to be obstacles along the way.
Sure.
The path that you perhaps first seek isn't necessarily the one that's going to reach the destination. And you might have to pivot along the way and move in a different direction. Or you might have to build cultivating resilience
Mm-hmm.
when times were good, helped me to navigate the tough times when they came too. And the last one was trust. I looked at trust and thought, well, if I don't trust in myself, then what capacity do others have to trust in me?
Mm-hmm.
And it needed to start with my trust in myself in order to believe that that hope for that destination, the energy in my tank, the actions I was taking, and the resilience I continued to cultivate needed to also, combine that with the confidence and the trust in myself to be able to execute on what I'd set my intention for.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my message. And I hadn't realized at that time that it had been all around me and most of my life. So that communicating with people, engaging with them, but speaking from the heart, living from heart, acting from heart and leading with it was ultimately what my purpose was about. And
Well,
it started with me having to be honest with myself.
that's amazing. And then for you to take that journey and kind of go with it. And I love also that the framework allows it to be cyclical in a sense, that acting actually does help rejuvenate and create more energy, and then just kind of rejuvenates the spirit of hope. And resilience is required to then continue to act, and trusting yourself builds more hope. So it really does build on one another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that took me to my career pivot. I realized at that point that this was something I was deeply passionate about. It resonated because I felt I hadn't been true to my own heart journey for a really long time. And I didn't want other people to feel that they didn't have the options to choose what it meant for them to follow their purpose and lead with heart. And that's what I do now. My executive coaching is very much based on using the heart framework to draw out an understanding of people in themselves and help them play back what I hear from them to give them clarity on how they move forward. I talk about the heart framework and take that into organizations because it links very heavily with change leadership. And in the environment that we're in now, where technology and the pace of change is so much faster than it's ever been, our ability to connect with our hearts, understand where we want to go and how we drive for that, but coming from a place of self-leadership allows us to drive change leadership with our organizations with much greater pace, but a much deeper connection and empathy at a human level. That means people are on the journey for the long haul and not ready to necessarily jump off the bus when times get hard.
And you spoke to you being an accountant or working towards that CFO kind of job title, and there is stigmas or a certain brand of individual that fits within categories of positions. And how can people either, one, fight through the stigma of a position, or two, recognize that maybe they don't fit the mold of a position so they could reinvent the mold or realize that the mold isn't for them?
Absolutely. I think what I learned through my journey was until I cultivated my own sense of identity from the inside, that my outside identity was always going to have greater power because I was at the mercy of what other people thought. And CFO for me meant other people would think I was important. It meant other people would think I was worthy. And it meant other people would think I was very, very intelligent. And it was all about seeking to belong, to fit in, and to be part of something. But once I started to cultivate my inner sense of identity around who was I first, what was the truth? I was always going to be a daughter. I was always going to be a sister. And how could I focus on the truth that was unchanging by getting still and understanding myself that allowed me to really see that my identity wasn't going to be influenced by an external environment. And what that then creates is the freedom for you to choose what you want to do, because you're not attached to the idea of a title giving your life meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd created meaning in just accepting that me being alive and breathing was meaning in itself, that I had a reason for being here.
And resilience and a few parts of the framework and everything that you're doing also helps people ward off against naysayers or haters out there, or people that say, no, you're not meant to be, or you can't do this. And how can people really handle that?
There are people that don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. And it often is because they haven't addressed the fear in themselves that perhaps seeing you follow your heart and your passion means that they get left behind, that they've got questions unanswered in themselves that leave them feeling that they don't know where they are. And so keeping you close and keeping you where you're at becomes a safety net for them to say, well, I don't have to look deep within me to understand where I'm going next if everyone's on the same page and stays here. But when friends see you moving in a direction that's different, and it takes courage to make a choice around giving up something that is safe and secure and moving into the unknown. But what that brings with it is a richness of reward that you wouldn't otherwise have access to when you stay in that one place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the naysayers often, it's not because I don't think deep down people are intentionally wanting to stop people because they think it's a bad idea. I think it's often their fear internally that says, well, what if they succeed, and what does that mean for me
Mm-hmm.
if I don't ask those same questions and explore where my life's leading to?
Mm-hmm.
So I think keep asking those questions first of all. I think your body often gives you so much more clues about what's right for you than not. I had a niggling feeling inside that I didn't understand for a really long time until I allowed myself to actually say, well, if my body knows that this doesn't feel right, what could it be?
Mm-hmm.
And I started exploring what did make me feel great. And as you alluded to earlier, is look at the areas where you lose the most amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was in communication with others, but it was also writing, finding that writing blog posts or poetry, I could lose time and not actually be aware of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where I found my joy.
Yeah, it's so true. When time just flies, that cliche of time flies, then you know you're in love, whatever that looks like. And so how can people, if the signs aren't obvious, if people are like, listen to the universe, who are these broads? I don't even know what they're talking about. Someone's listening or watching thinking that. How can someone pick up on the signs? How can they begin to this journey of finding their purpose?
I think it's actually a really easy step people can take is to decide to choose a purpose. And what I mean by that, it doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be grand, and it doesn't have to be something that you choose to do for the rest of your life. But it could start with something as small as, today I'm going to be really intentional about choosing my purpose to put a smile on every person I meet. Mm-hmm. Today I'm going to be intentional about choosing a purpose to make sure every one of my friends and family knows that I love them, or that I make eye contact with a stranger and I connect. And it can start with the smallest of steps, but at least you've made an intentional choice about picking what your purpose could be if you didn't know. And I think a lot of people wait and look at other people and say, oh, it's okay for you, it's easy for you, your purpose revealed itself and now you're following it. But it doesn't always work like that. I think if you choose it's like traveling in a car at night. You've got your headlights on, and the road ahead of you, but you can't see it. You can only see the tiny bit that's lit up by your headlights just in front of your car. And you move towards that light. And as you move forward, the next bit of the road reveals itself, and the next bit of the road reveals itself. And that's what I look at with purpose, is if you can make a choice to get in that car, turn the ignition and drive in the dark with your headlights on, and trust that each step of that path will reveal itself as you move forward. But be intentional about getting in the car and choose the car that you want. And in my case, it was, I want to influence people to have a better life and to feel fulfilled, so that they don't make choices based on external conditions and criteria that has their ego feeling secure, but internally not feeling themselves. So I'd encourage people to say, and the question that you said earlier around, where would you want to be in 12 months' time? If you were going to die, what would you have wanted to achieve over these next 12 months? Well, set that intention to say, I get to choose every day the person I am. So the eulogy at my funeral is one that I would be most proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. So share a funny story with us.
I think the funniest thing for me was I first came to Australia in 2003, and it was a place that I absolutely wanted to live and work. But at the time when I moved back to England, I met my partner, we'd got married, and we thought we were going to have a family. And I'd made a decision that I needed to let go of Australia in order to fulfill the life that I thought I was going to have back in the UK. So what funny for me was, it might not be for many others, was that actually it required my life turning upside down to actually achieve the dream that I always had from the age of 22. And now I have a much different life. I'm living in Sydney. I've made some new friends. I've got, wonderful connections with my family and friends back in the UK. But I feel like I've expanded my horizons by being able to follow that dream when, my youthful self, the uninhibited, the excited, enthusiastic adventurer has now returned.
Yay!
And it took the hard yards, but it's happened. And I think that's what's funny about the universe. Sometimes you might not get what you want at the time you want it, but it will always serve you what you need. I think Australia, I knew, was my home.
Was it? Do you have a one-word action item for us? 1 or 2 words?
Heart.
Yay.
Lead with it.
Love it. And if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, can they just head to your website?
Yeah, they can. And you can email me on glin@simplyglin. And it'd be lovely to hear from you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your framework with us and coming to us. I see the sun coming up behind you. What a beautiful way to end our time together. I appreciate it. Wonderful to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's head out to our shout out.
Hallo ihr Lieben, hier ist Kitty aus Los Angeles. Ihr hört und seht Strategic Hotbox. Es war mir eine Freude, euch dabei zu haben und euch zu fahren. Viele Grüße, ganz viel Spaß.
I was just trying to think of a word in German, and I couldn't come up with anything but Wiener Schnitzel. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sending us the shout out in German. We appreciate it so much. And thank you to Glin for being here on the Hot Box. Here is your top 5 kick-ass. Number 1, avoid self-imposed blindness. So making sure that you have your eyes on the prize. Know what it is. And I loved Glin's concept of waking up every morning and setting a very small intention of making the people around you smile, letting your family know that you love them. And those things can lead to the next, and being able to discover our purpose in a small way. Number 2, listen to the universe and pause. Give yourself a moment to breathe. Give yourself a moment to organize and understand what it is that you want to accomplish. Number 3, explore and try everything. Think about and revisit things that you've done in your younger self. Think about things that you want to try new or that you used to want to try new. And now give yourself the chance and ability to be able to do that. Number 4, be vulnerable. It's okay. Remember that growth comes from a place of discomfort. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because a lot of times when you are in those moments of vulnerability, you do have the greatest opportunity to connect with the people around you. And finally, number 5 is act. Take that first step. Kick ass. That's what it's all about. She's got the act right in the middle of her heart framework. And of course, we learn, we love, and we kick ass. There's your top 5. Thank Thank you again to Glin for being here on the Hot Box. Thank you to all of you for participating in everything that we have on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Head on out to our Twitter and Instagram at BrandiLove, BRANDILUV, or at Strategic Hotbox, or of course the website strategichotbox.com. Until I see you again, find some purpose, learn, love, and kick some ass.